Hi, I'm Deborah Marshall, 29, and I thought moving into my own apartment in Lansing, Michigan was my ticket to freedom. Years of grinding at the bank, saving every penny, it all paid off when I finally bought my dream place. A space that was mine, no one else's. Or so I thought. One night, I came home, dropped my keys on the counter, and froze. There they were, my parents sitting in my living room like they owned it. My heart pounded. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice shaking. My father leaned back, smirked, and said, "This house is now family property." I opened my mouth to argue, but my mother cut me off. Her voice sharp. No arguments. I stood there stunned, my safe haven invaded. How did they even get in? Why were they acting like my home wasn't mine? The betrayal hit hard, but what happened next was even crazier. Within 48 hours they were gone, rushing out without so much as a goodbye. And the reason why? Oh, you'll want to stick around for this. If you've ever had family cross a line and invade your space, drop your story in the comments below. Let's talk about those tough moments and hit that like button to keep the conversation going. Buying my apartment was the fight of my life, but it was worth every second. For years, I poured everything into my job at the bank in Lansing, Michigan. Every late night, every skipped coffee run, every extra shift, it all went into a savings account I guarded like a treasure. I wasn't just saving for a place to live. I was saving for freedom. The day I signed the lease, I stood in my empty apartment, keys in hand, and felt like I'd finally carved out a space that was mine alone. No one could tell me how to live, what to do, or who to be. At least that's what I thought. My journey to that moment wasn't easy. I started at the bank right out of college, crunching numbers, handling accounts, and learning the ropes of mortgages. It was grueling, long hours, endless paperwork, clients who yelled about overdraft fees. But I loved it. Every paycheck felt like a step towards something bigger. I'd sit at my desk, calculator in hand, plotting out how much I needed for a down payment. I cut out vacations, ate instant noodles, and skipped new clothes. My coworkers would tease me about my beat-up sneakers, but I didn't care. I had a goal: a one-bedroom apartment in a modern complex with big windows and a view of the city. By my late 20s, I'd saved enough to make it happen. The closing day was a blur, signing papers, shaking hands with the realtor, and walking away with keys that felt like a trophy. But there was always a shadow over my plans. Ruth Marshall, a retired accountant, 57, and Howard Marshall, a construction manager, 60. They never saw my dreams as mine. Growing up, they had a vision for my life, and it didn't include me breaking away. Ruth would hover over every decision, from what I studied in college to what car I drove. "You should be a teacher," she'd say, her voice sweet but firm, like she was doing me a favor. "Banking is too stressful." Howard was different. "Less talk, more demands. You're not moving out until you're married," he'd grunt, as if my independence was a personal insult. I'd nod, smile, and keep my plans to myself. By high school, I'd learned to keep my dreams quiet, because every time I shared them, they'd twist them into something else. It started small. When I was 16, I got a part-time job at a bookstore to save for college. Ruth insisted on managing my earnings, depositing them into an account she controlled. "It's safer this way," she'd say, but I never saw half of it. Howard would lecture me about practical careers, dismissing my interest in finance as a phase. "You'll burn out," he'd warn, pointing to his own long hours in construction. I pushed back, but it was like arguing with a wall. By the time I moved out for college, I swore I'd never let them control me again. I worked through school, took out loans, and paid them off early. Every step was a rebellion against their grip. Even after I landed my bank job, the pressure didn't stop. Ruth would call weekly, asking about my savings, my budget, my plans. "You should invest in bonds," she'd say, as if I hadn't spent years studying finance. Howard would show up unannounced at my old rental, inspecting it like it was his property. "This place is a dump," he'd mutter, then send me links to condos he thought were better. I'd brush them off, but it wore me down. They acted like my life was a family project they could manage. When I told them I was buying my apartment, Ruth's voice went cold. "You're not ready?" she said, like I was still a kid. Howard just shook his head, saying, "We'll talk about it later." I didn't want to talk. I wanted to live. The day I moved in, I thought I'd won. I unpacked my boxes, set up my furniture, and felt a weight lift. For the first time, I wasn't answering to anyone. I could paint the walls, eat dinner at midnight, or leave dishes in the sink without a lecture. But deep down, I knew Ruth and Howard wouldn't let go so easily. They'd always seen my choices as theirs to approve or override. I just didn't know how far they'd go to prove it. Settling into my new apartment felt like a dream until things started to feel off. A few weeks after moving in, I noticed something strange with my utility bills. I'd always paid them on time, logging into my online account every month to cover electricity and water. But one evening, I checked my email and saw a confirmation my latest bill was paid. The problem, I hadn't paid it. I logged in heart racing and saw the payment came from an unfamiliar bank account. I double-checked my records, no mistake. Someone else had accessed my account and settled the bill without my permission. I tried to brush it off as a glitch, but a knot formed in my stomach. Then there were the little things around the apartment. I'd come home after a long day at the bank and find my sofa shifted a few inches to the left. At first, I thought I was imagining it. But it happened again, cushions rearranged, not the way I left them. One of my favorite wall prints, a black and white cityscape, was tilted slightly like someone had dusted it and didn't bother to straighten it. I'd adjust it only to find it off-center again, days later. My coffee table books were stacked differently, titles I never touched on top. It wasn't just sloppy housekeeping, it felt deliberate, like someone was sending a message. The real scare came with my paperwork. As a bank employee, I'm obsessive about my documents. My mortgage papers, lease agreement, and financial records live in a locked drawer in my desk. One night, I pulled it open to check my budget and froze. The folder was there, but the papers were out of order. My lease, usually on top, was buried beneath bank statements I hadn't touched in weeks. A sticky note I'd left on one page was missing. I rifled through, checking every sheet, my hands shaking. Nothing was gone, but someone had been through it. I started to wonder if I was losing my mind. I grabbed a notebook and started logging everything. Monday, utility bill paid by an unknown account. Wednesday, sofa moved, cushions flipped. Friday, wall print tilted again. Sunday, mortgage papers rearranged. Writing it down made it real, and the knot in my stomach tightened. I checked my apartment's front door, no signs of forced entry. The electronic keypad hadn't logged any failed attempts. I changed the code anyway, punching in a new sequence with sweaty fingers. Just to be safe, I went to my bedroom and opened my small safe where I kept my backup keys and emergency cash. Everything was there untouched, but it didn't calm me. Someone had been in my space, moving things, touching my life. I started locking my bedroom door when I left for work, something I'd never done before. Every evening, I'd walk through the apartment, checking every corner. Was the rug slightly crooked? Was the kitchen counter too clean? I'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering who could get in. A neighbor, a maintenance worker. My mind kept circling back to Ruth and Howard. They'd always been controlling, always in my business. Could they be behind this? I pushed the thought away. It seemed too far-fetched. They lived across town, and I hadn't given them my access code. But the idea lingered, gnawing at me. I called my bank's IT department, thinking maybe the bill payment was a system error. They confirmed the transaction was manual, not a glitch, but couldn't trace the account without a formal request. I filed one, but it would take days to get answers. Meanwhile, I kept noticing things. A throw blanket I always left draped over the couch was neatly folded. My kitchen chairs were pushed in too perfectly, not the haphazard way I left them. I added every detail to my notebook pages, filling up with dates and observations. The more I wrote, the more I felt watched, like my apartment wasn't mine anymore. I needed answers, so I turned to someone I trusted. My best friend, Levi Murray, a 32-year-old tech guy, had always been my rock. We'd known each other since college, bonding over late-night study sessions and bad cafeteria food. He lived a few blocks from my apartment in Lansing, so I invited him over one evening to talk. I was rattled, my notebook full of weird incidents, bills paid by someone else, furniture moved, papers shuffled. I poured us coffee, sat him down at my kitchen table, and spilled everything. My voice cracked as I described the tilted wall print, the missing sticky note, the creepy feeling of being watched. Levi listened, his brow furrowed, not interrupting once. When I finished, he leaned forward, his coffee mug untouched. "I didn't want to freak you out," he said. "But I've seen something odd too." My stomach dropped. He explained he'd noticed Ruth and Howard's car, a gray SUV with a dented bumper, in the apartment complex's parking lot several times over the past 2 weeks. He'd spot it late at night, parked near the entrance when he walked his dog. At first he thought they were visiting me, but I hadn't seen them since moving in. Then he overheard a security guard at the front desk mention Howard's name. The guard said Howard sweet-talked the building manager into giving him the access code. Levi said, his voice low. Something about checking on his daughter's place. I felt the air leave the room. Ruth and Howard. In my apartment, it made too much sense. They'd always been controlling, always in my business, but sneaking in, touching my things, that was a new low. I gripped my coffee mug, my knuckles white. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I asked, my voice sharper than I meant. Levi held up his hands. I wasn't sure it was a big deal until you told me this, he said. But you're not crazy. Something's going on. His words hit hard. I wasn't imagining things. Someone, likely Ruth and Howard, was invading my space. Levi leaned back, his eyes steady. You're stronger than they think, he said. Don't let this shake you. You work too hard for this place. His confidence grounded me, pulling me out of the spiral of fear. I took a deep breath, feeling a spark of resolve. What do I do? I asked. Levi didn't hesitate. Cameras, he said. Get security cameras. If someone's coming in, you'll catch them. I can help you pick some out. His suggestion was a lifeline. Proof. That's what I needed. If Ruth and Howard were behind this, I'd have evidence. That night, I pulled out my laptop and started researching. Levi sat beside me, pointing out models with motion detection and cloud storage. We found a set of discrete cameras, small, wireless, easy to install. I ordered 3, one for the living room, one for the hallway, and one facing the front door. My bank account took a hit, but it was worth it. I chose expedited shipping, wanting them up as soon as possible. Levi promised to come over the next day to help set them up. You've got this, he said before leaving, giving me a quick hug. Don't let them take your peace. His words stayed with me, a reminder I wasn't alone. The next morning, I called the building manager. My voice was calm but firm. Has anyone asked for my apartment's access code? I asked. The manager hesitated, then admitted Howard had called, claiming he was helping with maintenance. I clenched my jaw, thanked her, and hung up. I didn't confront her yet. I needed evidence first. Instead, I double-checked the keypad, ensuring my new code was active. I also started locking every drawer in my desk, even the ones with nothing important. If Ruth or Howard were coming in, they wouldn't find anything easy to mess with. When the cameras arrived, Levi came over with a toolbox. We mounted them carefully, hiding the living room, one behind a plant, and the hallway, one in a corner. The front door camera blended with the peephole. I linked them to an app on my phone, testing the motion alerts. Every move would be recorded, stored online where no one could tamper with it. For the first time in weeks, I felt in control. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was ready to catch whoever was behind this. As Levi left, he squeezed my shoulder. You're not letting them win, he said. I nodded, my jaw set. I spent that day checking the camera feeds, watching for any sign of trouble. My apartment felt like a fortress now, but I couldn't shake the dread. What were Ruth and Howard planning? My cameras were ready, but nothing prepared me for what happened next. It was late, just past 9 p.m. on a chilly evening in Lansing, the first day after I'd set up the security system. I'd spent the day at the bank crunching numbers, my phone buzzing with motion alerts from the cameras. Nothing unusual, just a delivery guy at the door. I felt a flicker of relief, thinking maybe I'd overreacted. But when I got home, my keys jingled in my hand as I unlocked the door. The hallway was dark, but a faint glow spilled from the living room. My pulse quickened. I hadn't left any lights on. I stepped inside and froze. Ruth and Howard were there, sprawled on my couch like it was their own. Ruth was flipping through a magazine I kept on the coffee table, her glasses perched on her nose. Howard leaned back, arms crossed, a glass of my iced tea in his hand. My stomach churned. This wasn't a visit. This was an invasion. I dropped my bag, the thud echoing in the silence. What are you doing here? I demanded, my voice tight with anger. Howard looked up, his eyes narrowing, and said, This apartment is family property now. His tone was calm, like he was stating a fact. Ruth set the magazine down, her lips curling into a faint smile. We're just looking out for you, she said, her voice dripping with fake concern. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. You can't just walk in here, I said, stepping closer. This is my home. Howard didn't flinch. It's a family matter. He said, his voice heavy, like I was a child who didn't get it. We've already contacted the bank to add our names to your mortgage. It's for your own good. My breath caught. The bank. My mortgage. I'd spent years saving, signing papers, building this life, and they thought they could claim it. You did what I snapped, my voice rising. Ruth stood smoothing her sweater. We're only trying to help you, she said, her tone soft but patronizing. You're not ready to handle this alone. I wanted to scream. Help me. By sneaking in, by touching my things. I pointed at the coffee table, the magazine now slightly askew. Explain this now. Howard leaned forward, his jaw tight. We don't need to explain ourselves, he said. This is about family, not your little tantrum. I opened my mouth to fire back, but Ruth cut me off, her voice sharp and final. No arguments. The words hit like a slap. I stood there shaking my home, feeling like a cage. They weren't just crossing a line, they were erasing it. I took a step back, trying to steady my breathing. How did you even get in? I asked, my voice low, but burning. Howard shrugged, casual, like it was nothing. The building manager was happy to help, he said. We told him we're family. Ruth nodded, adding, We've been checking on the place, making sure everything's in order. In order. My bills paid without my consent. My papers shuffled, my furniture moved. That was their idea of order. I thought of the cameras now recording every word, every move. They didn't know I had proof. Why the bank? I pressed, my heart pounding. Why my mortgage? Ruth sighed like I was exhausting her. You're too young to manage property alone, she said. We've seen your statements. You're not as organized as you think. Howard nodded, sipping my tea. We're protecting our investment, he said. Investment? My apartment wasn't their project. I'd paid for every square foot with my own money. This isn't yours to control, I said, my voice shaking with fury. Get out. Now. Howard raised an eyebrow, unmoved. We'll leave when we're ready, he said. Ruth folded her arms, her smile gone. Don't make this harder than it needs to be, she said. I wanted to throw them out myself, but I knew I had to be smarter. The cameras were rolling. I had evidence. I just needed to hold it together. You're not welcome here, I said, my voice steady despite the rage. This is my home, not yours. They didn't move. Howard set the glass down, the ice clinking. We'll talk tomorrow, he said, standing. Ruth followed, brushing past me like I was invisible. They walked out, leaving the door ajar. I slammed it shut, my hands trembling. I wasn't going to let them take my home without a fight. After Ruth and Howard's intrusion, I stayed up late, my mind racing. Their words, family, property, bank, no arguments burned in my head, but I wasn't helpless anymore. The cameras were recording, and I had a plan. First thing the next morning, I marched to the building's keypad and punched in a new access code, my fingers steady despite my anger. I called the building manager, my voice firm, and told her no one but me gets the code, no exceptions. She stammered an apology, mentioning Howard's family emergency excuse, but I cut her off. That ends now, I said. She agreed to update the system. Next, I needed legal advice. A co-worker at the bank had mentioned a sharp attorney, Susan Stone, who handled property disputes. I called her office, booking an appointment for that afternoon. Susan's office was small but professional, with stacks of legal books lining the walls. The attorney, Susan Stone, greeted me with a firm handshake and a no-nonsense look. I laid out everything: the uninvited visits, the moved furniture, the paid bills, and Ruth and Howard's claim about contacting my bank. I showed her my notebook pages filled with dates and incidents. Susan listened, jotting notes, her expression growing darker with every detail. Then I pulled up the camera footage on my phone. The living room feed showed Ruth flipping through my magazine, Howard sipping my tea, their voices clear as they declared my apartment theirs. Susan's eyes narrowed. This is serious, she said, her voice clipped. Let's check your documents. I handed her my mortgage papers, which I'd brought in a locked folder. She flipped through them, then paused, pulling out a letter I didn't recognize. It was on bank letterhead, dated 2 days ago, requesting to add Ruth and Howard's names to my mortgage. The signature looked like mine, but it wasn't. This is forged, Susan said, her tone icy. Howard's work, I'd bet. He's trying to transfer ownership without your consent. My blood ran cold. Forgery. I thought of Howard's smug confidence, his claim of protecting their investment. Susan explained the letter was worthless without my approval, but it was evidence of intent to undermine my ownership. We'll need more proof, she said. Keep those cameras running. I nodded, my resolve hardening. Susan promised to draft a cease and desist letter and contact my bank to flag any unauthorized changes. "You're in control," she said, her voice steady. "We'll make sure they know it." That evening, I checked the camera feeds again. Nothing new yet. But the next day, the third since their first intrusion, things escalated. It was late afternoon when my phone pinged with a motion alert. The hallway camera showed Ruth and Howard at my door punching in the old code. It didn't work. Ruth's face twisted in frustration and she banged on the door. I was at work watching live on my phone, my heart pounding. I rushed home, arriving to find them inside. Somehow they'd gotten in again. The living room was a mess. My wall mirror, a sleek piece I'd bought to brighten the space, lay shattered on the floor, shards glinting in the light. The hardwood near the couch had deep scratches like someone had dragged something heavy across it. "What did you do?" I shouted, my voice echoing. Ruth spun around, her eyes wild. "You changed the code," she snapped, as if I'd betrayed her. Howard stood by the window, arms crossed, silent but glaring. "This is my home," I said, my voice shaking with fury. "You need to leave now." Ruth's face reddened. "We're your family," she yelled, grabbing a decorative vase from the shelf. Before I could react, she hurled it at the wall, missing the mirror's frame by inches. The vase didn't break, but the message was clear. "Stop it," I shouted, stepping between her and the shelf. "Get out or I'm calling the police." Howard finally spoke, his voice low and cold. "You're making a mistake," he said, stepping toward the door. Ruth hesitated, her hands trembling, then followed him. I pointed to the camera in the corner, its red light blinking. "It's all recorded," I said. "Every word, every move." Ruth's eyes widened, but she said nothing. They left the door slamming behind them. I sank onto the couch, my heart racing. The mirror's damage would cost $500 to replace, the floor $1,000 to repair. But I had proof, clear footage of Ruth's outbursts, the shattered glass, the scratched wood. I called Susan, immediately sending her the video. She confirmed it was enough to pursue legal action. "They've crossed into property damage now," she said. "We'll make them pay." I felt a surge of power. This wasn't just about my apartment, it was about my life. The morning after Ruth's outburst, I sat at my kitchen table, the broken mirror still scattered across the floor. My phone held the evidence, camera footage of Ruth smashing the glass and scratching the hardwood, Howard standing by complicit. I called Susan first, my voice steady, as I explained the latest incident. "Send me the video," she said, her tone sharp and focused. I emailed it along with the forged bank letter she'd found. Then I dialed the Lansing police, requesting an officer to file a report. My apartment, once my sanctuary, felt like a crime scene, but I wasn't backing down. An officer arrived within the hour, a no-nonsense woman named Officer Carter. I walked her through the damage, the shattered mirror worth $500 and the gouged floor estimated at $1,000 to repair. I showed her the footage, Ruth's furious face clear as she swung at the mirror. Officer Carter took notes, her expression grim. "This is deliberate vandalism," she said, copying the video to her device. "And that letter you mentioned, it's a serious issue. We'll need to investigate." I handed her a copy of the forged document. Susan had flagged my fake signature, glaringly obvious now. She promised to follow up and left me her contact card. Susan called me back that afternoon, her voice brimming with determination. "The bank confirmed the letter was unauthorized," she said. "They've rejected any changes to your mortgage. Ruth and Howard have no claim." Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. Susan had drafted a cease and desist letter demanding Ruth and Howard stop interfering with my property and life. "I'll send it today," she said. "But we need to address the vandalism too. The police report strengthens our case." I agreed, asking her to pursue full accountability. My home wasn't theirs to destroy. 2 days later, Officer Carter called. Ruth and Howard had been summoned to the station. They didn't deny the vandalism but refused to apologize. They claimed they were protecting your interests. Carter said, her voice laced with disbelief. "Said they were fixing up the place. And it got out of hand." I scoffed. "Fixing up, smashing my mirror and ruining my floor, wasn't fixing anything." Carter explained they'd been fined $1,000 for vandalism and ordered to pay $1,500 in restitution for the damages. Susan later confirmed they'd also face $7,000 in legal fees for their attempt to manipulate my mortgage. "Their learning actions have consequences," she said. I met Susan the next day to finalize the legal letter. It was concise, printed on her firm's letterhead, stating that Ruth and Howard were barred from contacting me or entering my property. Any violation would lead to further legal action. I signed it, my hand steady, feeling a weight lift. Susan mailed it certified, ensuring they'd receive it. "You're doing the right thing," she said, her eyes kind but firm. "This sets a boundary." I nodded, knowing what came next. I blocked their numbers, deleted their emails, and instructed the building manager to flag them as unauthorized visitors. I was done with their control. A week later, Ruth sent a letter, not an apology but a rambling justification. "We only wanted what's best for you," she wrote, claiming they were safeguarding the family's future. Howard added a note saying I'd regret pushing us away. I read it once, then tossed it into a drawer. Their words didn't matter anymore. I had my proof, my lawyer, and my resolve. The bank sent a formal notice confirming my mortgage was secure, untouchable. The police followed up, ensuring the fine and restitution were paid. Ruth and Howard had no choice. They wired the $1,500, though I knew it stung them more than they'd admit. Standing in my apartment, I looked at the taped-up mirror frame and the scratched floor. They were scars, but they were mine to fix. I'd hire a contractor, replace the glass, sand, the wood. This was my space, earned through years of work, and no one could take that away. Susan's words echoed in my head. "You're in control." For the first time, I truly believed it. Months after the chaos, my apartment in Lansing felt like mine again. The broken mirror was replaced, its new frame gleaming on the wall. The scratched hardwood was sanded and refinished, smooth under my feet. I added small touches, a cozy rug, a shelf of plants, to make the space my own. For the first time, I wasn't looking over my shoulder waiting for Ruth or Howard to barge in. The cameras stayed up, their steady presence a reminder of my victory, but I didn't need to check them obsessively anymore. I was free. To celebrate, I decided to throw a housewarming party. I invited Levi and a few close friends from work, people who'd cheered me on through the ordeal. The living room buzzed with laughter as we set up a makeshift buffet on my coffee table, pizza, homemade dips, and a tray of cupcakes I'd baked the night before. Levi, ever the tech guy, hooked up a speaker, filling the room with upbeat music. "This place is you," he said, raising a glass of soda, his grin wide. "You earned every inch of it." My friends nodded, their voices overlapping with congratulations. I smiled, warmth spreading through me. This wasn't just a party, it was a declaration that my home was mine. Word of Ruth and Howard's actions had spread through our extended family. Levi, who'd seen their car and overheard Howard's scheme with the building manager, didn't hold back. He'd told my cousins and aunts what happened, sharing how Ruth smashed my mirror and Howard tried to forge my signature. At a family gathering, I skipped. My cousin Emma called me afterward, her voice stunned. "No one could believe it," she said. "They've always acted so proper." Ruth and Howard's reputation unraveled. Aunts stopped inviting them to dinners. Cousins ignored their calls. Their control over the family narrative was gone, and I didn't feel a shred of guilt. They'd crossed lines that couldn't be uncrossed. Sitting on my couch after the party, I reflected on what I'd learned. Boundaries aren't just lines, they're walls you build to protect your peace. I'd spent years trying to please Ruth and Howard, bending to their demands, hoping for their approval. But their actions invading my home, trying to claim it, showed me that respect has to go both ways. Cutting them off wasn't easy. There were nights I second-guessed myself, wondering if I'd been too harsh. But every time I walked through my apartment, saw my plants thriving, my books neatly arranged, I knew I'd made the right choice. Sometimes walking away is the only way to move forward. This journey taught me to stand up for myself, to fight for what's mine. My apartment isn't just a place, it's a symbol of my independence earned through years of saving and sacrifice. I learned that family doesn't get a free pass to control you. If someone, even someone close, disrespects your boundaries, you have the right to say no. And if they won't listen, you have the right to let them go. I'm stronger now, not because I won a fight, but because I chose myself. Thank you for staying with me to the end. I'm grateful for every one of you. Sharing this story wasn't easy, it's raw, it's personal, but knowing you followed along means the world. Have you ever had to set tough boundaries with family? Share your story in the comments, I'd love to hear from you. Looking back, I learned a lesson that changed my life forever.